Welcome one more time. Thanks, Hannes, for lulling us into the evening. It's a very peculiar space. Resonated very well, I thought. The space, also the colors. But this is the common ground of this department. This is the chest hall. I said chest hall here. And we are going now to listen to Indrė Umbrasaitė's presentation of plan and of painting. So Indrė Umbrasaitė is an architect active in practice in academia, working on projects that embrace architecture in communication with art, design, and curatorship. She attended Čiurlionis School of Art. It's some resonance here. And among other things, also was a student here in interior design program in Vilnius Academy of Arts. Also a student in Latvia and in Vienna, and she received her master's degree from Zahadid Studio. Indrė has held positions in architecture offices in Vilnius, Salzburg, and Vienna. She has taught as assistant professor in Institute of Architecture and Landscape in Technical University of Graz, in Studio Kazuo Sejima, and as a lecturer of ATTP in Technical University of Vienna as part of the studio SOL. Indrė is also an editor of several publications in the field of architecture and education, and a member of interdisciplinary collaboration MIT Climate Visions. Her work has been exhibited internationally, including the Swamp School, which was part of Swamp Pavilion in Venice Biennale of Architecture in 2018, and also a famous exhibition at ZKM Karlsruhe called Critical Zones in 2020-21, among others. She's currently conducting research on time space of winter and is experimenting with alternative spatial metrics through interdisciplinary collaborations in various educational settings with her students. So, Indrė, very welcome.
Thank you, Povilas, for this generous introduction, and also for the department inviting me to, I have extra pressure because it's my alma mater and my home where I think I matured here, but then later I discovered I didn't. So it was a lot of other educational settings, and it's it's also a little bit pressure to talk after this beautiful performance of these great two artists because they were like really very beautifully tuned. But I hope I can pick up some, togetherness and, even the title somehow magically, without us agreeing, has the topic of painting. So what I chose to talk tonight about, and I will just set the timing for me, so Manten doesn't suffer from my talking too long. I chose to render the space that I'm thinking in since, actually I discovered that I'm thinking since I remember myself thinking, but I didn't acknowledge that for a very long time, and it takes time to acknowledge your own thinking, I think. So this title points out to two domains. And these two domains are the visions of space that came into my life as a conflict and a question or a contradiction. So one is the geometry space and the rational space of proportion and this kind of a nature of architecture that comes with the structure and composition of space through mathematical understanding. And the other tradition of thinking that came through painting actually, and this understanding of space as a sensual and space of the color dimension to me, and to the thinking of traditional space comes with the landscape as well. So this understanding of atmosphere and all these sort of forces that doesn't have representative geometry, but actually has a deep sort of effect on us. So I will come back to that in the end of my talk. But for this talk, I prepared like three short parts, and 3 parts represents actually three contexts that I've been active in the past, let's say roughly 8 to 10 years, and they are all related to academic activities, because my own work in time shifted more and more into research-based project making. So all the thinking and design decisions that I do in the, so to say, practice, they come somehow and grow out from very long investigations. I am also somehow, what do you call Hannes, junior researcher, or officially, because I'm also like in a pre-doc position, and I could resonate so much with your passion, you know, to study again, because last year I took, you know, courses in physics and the climate science. So it was crazy because I was going into these, you know, lectures with the physicists, and they all know these, you know, constants of the physics by heart, and I was like, well, why am I doing this? But it was a fantastic outcome. So just to reference 3 project spaces is a representative project I picked from my time in Angewandte, which basically forged the thinking of architecture as a kind of a landscape dimension. The second project I picked up is from the investigations of past 4 years already in Institute of Architecture and Landscape in Graz, and it's also ongoing somehow investigation at the time. It found different forms, I will tell a little bit. And the third is actually what I started just currently, or like recently, and it's still very fragile and vulnerable, but I wanted to talk about it because it's, you know, this academic space allows me to be very frank and to experiment, and somehow these dimensions are also packed in the workshop that we're doing and, you know, talking about. So this, I have this little book if somebody is interested. It represents 4 years of investigation with the team in Angewandte in thinking of architecture in the scale of landscape, and in the scale not in terms just because I had the students which I continuously work with, but also we could acquire but also we could acquire like a larger sort of format of course also funding body, but also network relationships with the local communities and building up like the kind of relationship between academy across the year. And the method that I'm thinking always and working is to start from the environment, to start from thinking our you know, spatial intervention material always from the local kind of space. And first task always is like to study that space deeply. So it takes a lot of time and effort. The village, the Vorarlberg, as I mentioned, has not just the kind of a natural cycles that come with the seasons, but it has also the kind of a labor and material flows that comes with the seasons. And it is really exhausted through the interventions that we as a team with the students analyze from different layers. So for example, you can see in this model is the exploration of the underground in the village of 2,000 inhabitants officially. So you can imagine that every hotel and every household is connected through the tunnel systems, and these tunnel systems are circulation systems, gas piping, you know, trash and so on. So basically we have this pristine looking landscape with these enormous infrastructures around. And what you see here is like different aspects of 1 year of study that you know, we organize students in the groups to study this sort of valley with the kind of ecosystems and to take upon specific investigation. And what is important is, of course, to translate those findings in the sort of spatial dimension. And the spatial dimension is, you know, the model is very good to work for that.
the discovery is that the large interiority of the valley systems of the mountains and the people that form, they're not just their like sort of traditions, but also their understanding of togetherness in these very strong landscapes. So, for example, this group of Michael and Godwin, they are investigated the kind of relationship of the tops of the mountains, how they fall together, and the velocity that you cross across the valley from one ski lift to another through the different means. So we have the ski lift, this is the single line, and this is like a moment of 3 minutes, like you just are shooted sort of up. And then you have like, sort of the snow boot walk, and then you have the sort of investigation into the skiing, trajectory. And these moments were very important to overlap with the sort of real scientific data and to understand not just like kind of a geometry of the space, but the performative quality of the space. What does it mean to live in the kind of very secluded valley that is having a problem of job market, that have also like a very difficulty for education and local people to find jobs in the summer season, but suddenly in winter the local people cannot even afford being there. So we looked at it, from all dimensions to find, angles and to find the sort of to come back to the roots of how it came to be that this village, is not affordable for the local community. I have to say we had local partners to work with. We had local initiatives who kindly asked us to think with the students, how to challenge the problematic and conflict that comes with the high tourism in the Alpine area and shortage of living space for the local communities, whereas there is this super boost of tourism and royal families and all the politicians going there. So this specific group developed a project of possible project of housing and service that followed the sort of the ski lines, and as an idea, of course, it was also represented for the local community. We were looking for possibilities to open up the building code and to extend somehow the existing zoning regulations. So this housing sort of idea that could create also communal space for local people beyond the booming tourism was in the forefront of all these investigations. Very briefly, as a different take on the same question of To Nature Village, another proposal to intervene in the existing infrastructures of the snow catchers. I mean, these projects require a lot of context explanation, but I want to stress that first, to approach the project, one needs to study deeply the existing infrastructures and existing spaces. So this group of other students for another half a year engaged in a question also of a living space for temporary workers who are hired in the winter season to cater to the sort of infrastructure of the skiing, and proposed sort of a space for dwelling that would be anchored to already existing snow catcher system. And the last example from this investigation in the dimorphic village was actually the proposal of another group to look into the distance through the question of visibility, and to frame to limit the growth of the valley, like to freeze it in time through their intervention of new communal amenities. So this was a very interesting moment because what they proposed is to give you know, like a bracket for the space that it has currently, like no zoning you know, sort of condition. And this was the team, and I wanted to start with this sort of rather old investigation, let's say from several years ago, because this was like you know, a moment where I myself as an academic and also as a practitioner realized the enormous gap in demand, you know, to ask critical questions and not to find any resonance in the kind of a politics of space making. So our project failed, obviously. I mean, we had like a demand from the local community to bring these projects. It was a beautiful exhibition and we did all these things, but it failed in the end because we could not lobby to the level of the politics, you know, and decision making. And of course, the changing governments are not in favor of radical, you know, togetherness. So I'm jumping to the second context. And the second context I also brought, it's a manuscript actually, where I decided to actually give myself also like a focus for the past 4 years to think in landscape dimension, not just in a kind of a contextual terms, but in much stronger performative terms. So sort of to think about landscape as a you know, building matter, and the one that performs in ecological, economic, and political terms, but also these performers are not merely human actors, but also more than human actors. So this is where I come to sort of the plant ecology and to the topic of learning from human and non-human agencies. The project that I want to briefly talk to you is an investigation that is found now some forms in a real scientific and technical sort of research project. Is a project that we initiated in 2024. Well, the discussion started actually earlier, but we initiated 2024 on the specific site in Mallorca. Mallorca belongs to one of the 3 famous tourist islands, and it has all these problems that are listed here in the diagram. And these problems are not exclusive, these are planetary questions. And what was the interest of the Institute and my work team, that we saw a potential to go into places that are classically shallow. You know, there is like sort of idea from the society that these are spaces beyond redemption. They are like, in ecological terms, they are close to the ecosystem's collapse. In terms of the communal, you know, social systems, they are beyond sort of like any local community initiatives, though they are there, but they are like out of scale. And we partnered very important topic, and we partnered the topic of the soil and the topic of agriculture and food systems, and the topic of biochar, so to say. So through the lens of the biochar, which is, I will quickly introduce what it is, if somebody didn't hear this term, it's a very ancient technique in agriculture to make soil fertile and to lock sequestered CO2, of course. So the technique of biochar is official term also in the kind of European Union now, and as a technology to sequester the CO2, as I said, but in traditional vernacular thinking, it comes from Amazonia. So it's actually terra preta, which is called the black earth. And it's a technique that allowed Amazonians to become very rich and very prosperous, like garden, where thousands and thousands of people, communities, you know, could develop the civilization and actually produce their own local food. Amazonians traditionally are very difficult soil because it's a swamp. So you need to add minerals and other nutrition to make fruits grow. And this agroforestry of course on the forefront of like sustainable food structures is being rediscovered. But the interesting story is here that there was actually a Swedish man who spent his a lot of years in Amazonia with his Mallorcan wife. Came back to Mallorca, and after many years he saw this collapse. So somehow we partnered him to think about how to make this topic of biochar production and the topic of educating a new generation of farmers, local farmers, visible in space. And the task with the students we had for that year was to think about the headquarters as educational campus, you know, where people would come and learn techniques of making biochar, but also would learn what potentials it has. So our semester had a double kind of connotation. On one hand, the students had to design the headquarters on this existing ground, and on the other hand, it had like this kind of a island dimension, because we wanted to find a way through the spatial sort of intervention in the specific site of production of biochar to create a network and reach out of impact to you know, to the entire island, but also beyond. So this is the site, and the site is very limited and very like real. It's a premise of rented ground where Christian Soderberg from Circle Carbon Labs is producing you know, biochar in low, let's say in small amounts. And he was experimenting with different compositions because to make a fertile soil you need to compose biochar with the compost, and then you will need to add minerals for this amazing material to actually become a fertile soil. Biochar as a crystalline structure itself has just sort of a very great quality to attract living organisms that boost the cycle of water, and organisms that can feed the plants and of course boost the growth of the food. So I'm telling that because this was our task, this is the structure, and also the method how I work with the students, which maybe also resonates a little bit with my theme of the workshop, that you guys have to go with these crazy tasks together. But basically each student started from the key plant that is not necessarily, so one plant was native and one was a species that would come into the local climate, would be important, and they were teamed by the plants to actually study both the spatial qualities, but also the soil qualities that are needed for growing of the food. And then we actually had these all sort of agencies that are needed for human and plant community to come together. And then the setup, the last part of it was actually this very hands-on aspect of like, okay, this is a real site and we want to learn how to make first biochar, how to communicate that it's important to learn about the biochar, and also to have the learning that is not in academic setting, but also like in field. So the first thing we did, we actually went with the students to Mallorca, and we spent some days, like a week, in actually trying to make this biochar by ourselves. But of course we had like a master Krista and his team to help do it, because this is something quite peculiar. He has this amazing technology, of course, to, maybe I'll just repeat the slide because it was very short and I'm behind. He has this amazing, very low-key technology. You see this kiln where you actually burn in a specific manner the organic waste. The waste in this specific case is collected from local farmers, so it's like the garden cut, and intense work to sort out that waste. So Christian himself is actually exercising and experimenting, you know, which bio-waste produce what kind of biochar. But we with the students, we had like already like sort of a kind of a prepared setting to make sure that we go through all the process. So the process is basically more or less in the 3 days. You can have something from like organic waste to the coal or the char that is already then ready to be crushed and mixed with the soil. But our task was not just of the material, but of the systemic thinking. This systemic thinking, you know, it somehow makes things very complicated because you never come to one conclusion, and everybody remains like after big dinner, you know, with the choices that were not finished and done. But in a way, it's also the task that I see is for us to broaden the spectrum of questions. Where we as architects, designers, spatial practitioners, where can we act? Where can we go with our knowledge and what kind of tasks we can pick out there in the world? So a part of producing biochar itself, the secondary task was actually to investigate this old site that has an old glass structure built in the 40s, 50s, and destroyed recently from the climate events, and investigated from different dimensions because we needed to propose not just like a sort of building structure, but we needed to propose like a landscape design, like a garden with a plant community where the biochar could be applied. So this is like some snippets very quick from our workshop. Also we have partner university, but also some local farm initiatives that we could open our thinking as designers where to act and how to articulate the space. And yes, we have to draw a lot of plans. So really to understand, the space, how to, actually the question is here, how to make a space that is not made by, bricks or other static elements, but actually made by constantly living matter. And just to give you some insights, like methodologically, we start, and I start with the students always attacking few parallel scales. So the task is always to think in the micro scale and in the macro scale, and then come together in this sort of design intervention. So my team maybe recognize a little bit from our kickoff presentation. There is a lot of sort of knowledge that is asked from us designers and architects that is not from our discipline. And this is actually very enjoyable once you forget that it's not your domain and allow yourself to actually see the living world from the perspective and sensibilities that we all are trained. And one of the projects, for example, had to design cooking facilities, kitchens, because it is important to have the interface where the community can come together and use the produce of the garden. And we did it also on our workshop as well. We were foraging and sort of doing our food there. So something like we do already here in workshops. And this team of Maya and Hanne, they actually observed a very interesting moment. They observed the need for different type of spaces or a kitchen for traditional cooking. So traditional, Balearic cooking is always outdoor and it's a lot of fire. And then experimenting with the different sort of ideas of contemporary cooking. So there is a different kind of technologies that come in there, cooling, freezing, fermenting, that comes from different cultures because the plants and fruits are coming from different cultures. So they proposed the two different kitchens, basically based on this sort of close investigation. Without going into deeper detail, thought is somehow resonating also with the topics raised by our umbrella discussions at this year's workshops. Was a topic of waste and material flows. So Sean and Candy, they actually took care of it for the entire group and investigated material flows, not just kind of in the island, but also within our sort of glass house. Proposed very crazy pneumatic idea, to go with the kind of very old school technologies to move materials from one part of the site to another. But why I wanted to include this specific take is that it raised the question what is actually waste in this kind of a circular economy and the dynamism of the planet. There is no such thing as waste itself unless it's a waste that we waste, So this was very interesting because they brought into the table, this aspect, okay, we have plant matter, we have soil, we have old building structures, but actually, there is no waste in the end if we are smartly sort of designing and thinking. So in the end, we got this collective plan, and this collective plan is 2 meters long plan, actually in real life, that was bringing together 16 design groups, 8 bachelor and 8 master groups. And in the end, we actually proposed 2 models of acting, and this one was from the master group that we luckily could win, some of research and industry partners. So this project hopefully goes on, and we will be exploring the potential of biochar in the building industry and in the food industry, so to say. And because my time is up, maybe I should skip the third part. Let's do like this. I will just tell you, I'm working on winter because I'm missing this amazing space. Currently recently I started this investigation not as just a dissertation, but as a sort of, the video is not playing, no? Okay, video is not playing, so we go to the map. As a comparative study between 2 coastlines in the framework of one research residency last year. And I proposed to actually pose the question, what is the quality of planetary cold and how that translates into the space through the sort of elements of the landscape, and then how that bridges into human practices. So these are sort of investigations that I'm currently running with between 2 coastlines, one here in the Baltic sort of context, and the other one on the south on the Mediterranean, like Provence coastline, that both actually deals with the question of climate change in different manner. And my proposition was to actually look through the plant space and through the material of plant in order to trace back the quality of holding climate intact and also holding the living spaces intact. So the research itself encompasses for now 4 key trees or plant species in our context and 4 in the Mediterranean context that had a capacity to dwell and bring like sort of climate balance with the cold that I mentioned. So I've been working this as a sort of research project for now, and I would like to propose sort of this method of designing and like bridging the scales, with So the learnings from this dimension of landscape, and I'm very purposefully not saying word nature, is the invitation to think from the perspective of designing and planning space. And this landscape is the dimension where the painterly and the sort of planner minds meet together. And in this sort of space, we have the agencies that are simply are not in the relation of linear or a sort of scalar relationship that is rational, nor it is possible to put that always in a commensurable way. That means that all align in a logical manner. And this space, you know, where you jump registers and somehow get inventive and creative and imaginary between these formative new nature sculptures, it's the kind of the space that I love to engage with. And I'm actually very happy that I could propose the workshop now here and actually explore some of these dimensions with the students. So I thought that I shortened the presentation quite much. Very sorry for like 4 minutes overdoing it, but thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
It's okay. Wait. And taking 4 additional minutes. It was very interesting to listen, and maybe we can follow up in the brief discussion. But let's move on to the last presentation for tonight by Manten Devriendt, who's an architect and spatial player. I'm just going to quickly present him and give him the mic. So he studied architecture and urban planning at Ghent University and KU, and collaborated with such architectural offices as it's going to be hard for me, I'm sorry. Noitering's Riga, Studio Martin Bay, SDK Latvia, it's 194E in Belgium. As a researcher at the Art Academy of Latvia, visiting lecturer at the Academy of Estonia, Vilnius Academy of Arts, Politecnico di Milano, Faculty of Architecture, University of Porto, Riga, Technical University, Seba University, Faculty of Architecture and Design, Ghent University, Faculty of Architecture and Design in Belgium. Manten is part of SAM. It's a Belgian Latvian disciplinary and conceptual architecture and design practice based in Ghent and Riga. It is led by Liene Jakobsen, whom you might know from being here as part of our final reviews and also now a lecturer in the new program of Masters. And Manten, they work together and run the studio. They founded the practice in 2010. So Sampling has carried out a wide range of projects, buildings and reconstructions of various kinds, developing concepts for large areas, as well as exhibition and production design. The projects have been widely published and have received a number of awards, prizes, and other forms of recognition. Both partners are also active in international academia, giving lectures, running creative workshops, conducting research and publishing. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Maybe just one good thing to mention is also that Manten is also presenting some work in this year's Architecture Biennale in Venice, as I think it's a very, very interesting topic. But I'm just, thank you, and I'm just giving a microphone, and we'll chat afterwards. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for inviting me for this inspiring workshop. It's always nice to be part of a group of intellectuals and being at universities, because I'm maybe more in the practical field since I'm running my office already for a long time. But I'm always combining it with the education, because I think working with students is so inspiring. Working with people like Hannes and Indrė is so inspiring. Brings new ideas to the practical field. So that's also one of the reasons why the lecture of tonight, which was foreseen to have, I had the idea to put 3 projects. Because of Laura, I added a 4th one, so I'm going to do some insight of this. So maybe it's interesting also to see what is Venice, what's Venice as a biennale, what is it, why it's so important, and the pros and the cons of the event. As a start, I wanted to do some kind of a small project we did for the top biennale in Estonia. There's a competition. This year, last top biennale, we got into the finals, and there was an idea to make a pavilion somewhere next to the ECA. But the whole idea was about circularity. So we proposed a project called the Clouds. So a cloud, everyone knows, it's like this kind of area where you store everything, but we saw it very physical. So instead of having a virtual cloud, we wanted to make a kind of a real cloud. And we had some kind of things like you always have to aim big, you always have to have a big ambition if you start with a thing. We were looking for good industries. What is a good industry? So we worked with the CLT, because the CLT industry is some kind of a, let's say, promising industry, especially in the Baltics. We have a lot of wood, so why not? What can we use of this CLT industry? So what is inside the CLT industry? So a good industry, I think it's what Indrė already said, has good waste, has no waste. So we try to understand what is the, let's say, what is the waste, and what is the aesthetics of waste. Because I was telling this morning as well in the video that the concept of aesthetics should change. I mean, we cannot talk in the same way as we did for a long time about aesthetics. So you're going to see that also for the other projects. Most people determine our project as something very ugly. It's a kind of aesthetics. That's what I said always to the others. And then for us, reuse is not recycling. You're going to see it in the project, and a good demolition also means that you can disassemble things. And this has a long history, so if also the students are going to see this kind of images that I used a lot. So on the right side you see a house in Togo in Mali. That's the way how they define architecture, the same at the base, the middle and the top. It's very disassembled because it's natural materials. There's a kind of aesthetics in it. The middle part is really aesthetic for them. It's open, it fits to all the needs of the climate. And on the left side you see this kind of a famous kind of thing, it's a spolia. Yeah? It's a kind of a combination of elements. And this is something we have been doing for all our times. I mean, until the Industrial Revolution, we were doing these kind of things, and it was normal. The city was our place of harvesting materials. So we built things with the things that were available in the city. And on the left side, you see an image of Brussels. A while ago, they were like demolishing a building. And instead of what we would do now, to bring all the mass to the big hill outside the city, they started in the city and they sold it. So it's new material, it's material that we can still use, something they are doing in Togo nowadays still. So we we made a scene of the CLT industry. And this is how a regular house is made in the CLT industry. You have the panel, you cut out windows, you have to chop them, so you have some kind of sticks, you wrap them in PVC or foil to transport. So we have our cloud. So we took out all these kind of elements that are kind of waste in the production of a house. And we said, what can we do with that? So this was our starting point for our design. So for that we worked with a company that was like really into it, and they hoped to win the project as well. So we had some kind of an agreement that we could do the project for free, since the funding was almost nothing. Like more than like a minus than a plus. So the whole idea was like, how can we make a project and that is like kind of using all the kind of waste plus the, let's say, the quality of the CLT, plus also how can this project be kind of storage for the city, because as you remember, so this is like a kind of an investigation that we did together with the team, checking like, okay, in the production of these kind of houses, you have also a sawmill, you have a lot of foil, and so on. So this was the site. We also, as architects, of course, checked the flows of the area. The Estonian Academy is somewhere up there. And we also said like, okay, what if this building site is also something interesting, something like an ongoing work where people can pass by, maybe help. Of course, that's not allowed in the building to let's say work with the building site, but at least that it becomes some kind of an active thing that people see what you can do with materials, and that the site is some kind of a construction process. And this was my first sketch for the project, so we thought of, okay, we can kind of stack these kind of elements. We can use the saw sacks as roof elements, the thin blocks that we saw, like these kind of 10 by 10 centimeters, could become some kind of a roof structure. And so this whole way of designing went to this kind of reusing waste. In the end, we also invited an engineer to be sure that our ideas are valuable. And of course, for him, it's kind of not normal to work with existing materials. But nevertheless, we got some really interesting discussions for the competition, and he said that it would be possible. I also have some kind of an engineering background, so I thought it could be possible, but at least it's always nice to work together with other disciplines. And in the end, you get a building that looks like this, or a space that looks like this, that is a result of this kind of thinking within the streams of a material, has a certain kind of aesthetics that of course you as a designer are making, but it's not maybe the aesthetics that you would expect from the beginning. But in the same time, this project you can dismantle, you can reuse, you can do other things with that. The foil you can always use again. The stones that are on the bottom, those are the stones that you can reuse later. And of course, we also made a nice model in order to bring the idea to the top, and they kind of liked it, but they were not convinced enough to give us the first prize. Nevertheless, I think this project was a really nice exercise to understand what is possible with CLT and with the CLT industry. And I like to do this kind of finger exercises, and mostly we do this kind of exercise together with other authors, so that we learn from each other. So that's the project. Another project that I wanted to discuss is something we did a long time ago already. I've been talking quite a lot about this project since it went to all kinds of prizes. And it was kind of a main transformation, I think, in Latvia, that finally people started to understand that you can also do things with normal buildings that are not classified as heritage, but you don't have to destroy the building immediately and build something new. So there was a client coming to me, since I'm Belgian. He said, you know, probably something about beer. We wanted to make a brewery. So this whole story was really nice because for me, the process of making beer is a story in itself. So it's like, okay, let's go to Belgium. Let's see how people are making beer. So we visited a lot of breweries. So I was besides the designing the brewery, also designing the whole technology of making beer. So I was proposing some kind of a new way of making beer. One, like it should be like some kind of entertainment. People should see that somebody is making or is performing to make beer. And in the other way, I organized it normally, it's like organized horizontally, but I did it in this way. So they pour from the top, and so it's almost like some kind of event happening. And we've got a lot of problems, of course, with the heritage, the hygienic commissions and so on, because it's so open and people are running above each other, which is not allowed. But nevertheless, they got it through, and it became some kind of an icon in the city. I hope this time the movie is going to start.
We think it will start.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a project that Roland knows as well, because his part was in the jury, the Latvian jury for the architectural award. And he also really liked the building and he wanted to give us the first prize. But nevertheless, somebody else got the first prize, but we got an award. So we were really happy with it. And this building is situated in a manufacturing area. There are so many manufacturing areas in Riga, since it has been very industrial. And I'm gonna show you some kind of the process, so the way how we worked. And this building, for me, kind of explains why we have to change the way how we make architecture, or the way how we try to get into try to let's say approve a project, one to the client, also to the government, to the authorities, and so on. Since the building was almost like an ugly chat in the beginning, and it ended up that the heritage department was almost like saying it becomes like a monument. Now it's even classified as a spot in Riga, and the architectural unit is also organizing all of these events in the building under the name of architectural heritage, which is for me kind of a joke, because it's not a heritage at all. It's just a space that suddenly got some kind of a common sense for the neighborhoods. Also, since this space is like on the outskirts of Riga, it's not in the center of Riga, in a spot very close to a microrium, and strange enough, the microrium didn't have any bar. So now the bar is handed bar for the microrium people, and also for these kind of hippies and I don't know, hipsters that like to be in these kind of spaces. So this picture, I think, illustrates very well our approach. So there are certain things when I started making the building is that, okay, first we clean, something we did with the students as well. Everything that collapse. And then I said to the builders, so everything that we place new is gonna be wet. It's gonna be the wet Soviet wooden brick. Yeah, and it was a kind of a way to communicate very well with the builders. So windows that we don't need anymore, since this is a technical room, we just close it off with red bricks. But in the future, maybe this becomes also a space, and then we can open it again. Another thing is the windows. They as well, they are reused. So they are in fact the windows that we found in the inside. We moved them to the outside, and on the inside we placed new windows, and you will see that later. One thing what is really important for me is that we live in a time that we also want to show off as architects. So we also want to add our part to the project. So in the past, if you renovate, you only renovate and you do it nicely. It's like there was a famous architect X. I'm going to do it exactly as he was doing. No, I also want to add something. So everything I'm adding is this concrete part. And it's not the concrete part that is like done because of the sake of concrete. On the top, the whole building was like opening up. So what we did is we made a concrete ring. Of course, we made it a bit bigger than needed, but it holds the whole building together. And the building needed, of course, an entrance. So we made a little bit bigger roof than needed. Also, constructually, some kind of a big exercise, since it's only supported by the column and kind of a stair block. But nevertheless, those are the elements that you add, and I hope in the future that new architects are coming and they will add their kind of thing. And also, of course, since it's a bar or a public building, it has to be as open as possible. So all the surfaces that we created are kind of a public zones. So we made lots of terraces. All the roofs became terraces, and they are using it. But this is the place that we got in the beginning. Very dark. As you see, no windows on the sides. There was as well a fire in the building. So these are the kind of difficult moments, I think, as for a designer when you go there with a client, to convince the client that this kind of space, I called it like this, it's like the basilica of the space, because it was like so high. But you see already immediately there's all these kind of qualities. So in my mind this was already, so that's exactly the same space. The only thing we did is that we opened it a little bit. We cut some holes, we added some light inside, we closed up the bottom part, we added some very cheap metal doors, very cheap tiles, since it's a brewery, and of course this kind of industrial lighting. And then in my mind and my references, art is playing a very important role. So for me, light is not only like light coming from certain sides, but also the way how the light is positioned. And in that sense, an artist like Dan Flavin is a really important reference for me. And mostly I'm using him as some kind of a way how to explain to somebody that I have three kind of tubes on the roof and one on the side, and so on. And this is exactly this kind of approach that we do with sampling a lot. One of the reasons why we are called sampling, because we sample with materials. And we always also think that the building doesn't have an end. So some pieces are not finished, because I was always like saying to the client, maybe this space can become the apartment for somebody. So let's keep it open. Let's not fill it. But of course, you have to have a lot of imagination if you start making things. But as you see, we kept the beams, so there no beams, so the client was really happy. Less payment. We just made them, we paint them black. But we kept also the beams, and that's like a big discussion with authorities. Why are you keeping beams? And my trick is keep the beams, because then you can write it in a project as a floor. It stays an element, you don't have to get any agreement on that. But it's open because there's no floor inside. And you get this kind of really nice spaces. Of course, whatever kind of element you're adding, a beam, immediately think of it as some kind of a sign or an element, a design element in the space. And this is what I was saying, like we were, so there was a fire in the building, they came, they demolished a little bit the building, and suddenly part of the wall fell apart. And then I said, okay, we're gonna rebuild it with beds. And this, the masoner who was doing it was like really proud, because he was used to do it. He said, like, to me, like, you have one line and you have one in the other direction, then I make six and have it in the other direction. So he was designing this wall in a way how he was used to make it. Had a lot of difficulties with the concrete, of course, asked me why it should be in this form, but nevertheless, he kind of did this kind of things. And so the whole building is like, we transformed it, became really open, and it's a very popular space in Riga. has lots of details, lots of reuse. Most of the steel that you see is just steel that we reused from the site. It's not new material. Of course, the railing is a difficult thing because it has new norms, new specifications. So that's something that is kind of difficult to reuse or to find as a use element. But all the lamps are coming from the manufacturer. We just redesigned a bit of the connections. So this was a space after cleaning. It became already really nice. The facade, long story short, we had this kind of Soviet interventions, and I was saying yes, nice, because finally we have big windows. But of course the heritage department said like, but you have this kind of classical windows next to it. I said like, yes, you had it, but it costs a lot to fill it, so let's keep it like it is. Of course, in the end, we got a kind of big window, but we had to restore this kind of brick decoration, which was like 2,000 euros per window. But nevertheless, I mean, that's this kind of constantly the fight that you have with the people that are looking at the past and not looking at the future. Of course, we work a lot with models, and there's like a huge model in the office, and if you see the result, it's more or less the same. And then, of course, in the end, when you have to bring the project to other places, and it's always nice to take pictures and explore the spot. So I'm going to jump to a project that I've never presented. It's 2 months. We got let's say we finished the project. It's still going on. But what I really like about this one is that the client came to us and said, "I saw your brewery and I like your facade. I want to have the same. I have already architects who did the interior, but I like your facade." And I said, "Okay, I'm not a facade architect. If you want, I can also do the interior, because the design of the interior is not done very well." So he said, like, "Okay, let's do it." And he was like constantly asking me, like, "What are you going to do? You as a Belgian, I mean, what are you going to do?" So I sent him this sketch. I said, like, "Okay, you have a wonderful building, so there you have some steel, then you have like this, and we're gonna add a lot of colors. I like all these kind of different stones." And we had a discussion also about the silicate stones, for instance. Yeah. So in this building, you have 4 different types of stones. You have a process. The building was rebuilt 3 times, so always with additions. In fact, the facade that you see is not anymore the constructed facade, because we built an industrial building inside, but it's with its own constructive system of concrete and columns, and that gave us some kind of a freedom. So I immediately said, okay, but then we can insulate from inside this part. Another shift, we can do the opposite. Of course, we also had a lot of discussions with the client about colors, but if you see the beginning, was not so kind of facades or spaces to be happy of. The only thing I was really happy about is that there was one lady, and she used these kind of entrances to the basement as a place to have planting. So I was saying, yeah, but this you see that the people are using the space as a I mean they want to have it as their own. So the project is like multi-layered. There's one classified building on the street side, and in Riga, if you have a classified building, that means that you have to kind of do it according to what was done in the past. But then, if you look at the building, you see that there's almost nothing original. So during times in the 2000s, they renovated the windows with this kind of typical German profile, so there's nothing original anymore. the only original window was somewhere in the corner. There was no gate anymore. The roof was completely rusty, and so on. And the window sills were just some kind of steel plates. So luckily, I found a great image in the heritage department with a red roof, like colored with a pencil. So I had an argument to say that the roof should be red, and the grey was just the paper color. So the grey is the grey. And the thing we did is only like grey architecture. So we restored the facade, and we added one element, which is the windowsill, because in Riga you get a subsidy if you have lighting in your facade. So we did like an auto thing. So we included the lighting in this window, so and gave this kind of character to the building, as well as the gate, of course. Because if you see the gate in the beginning, the gate afterwards, of course, it's a big difference. And that's what we do with this kind of thing. We clean it a little bit, and it becomes nicer. We cover the gas pipe. We add lighting on the side, and it becomes nice. The same with the back doors, as usual in the Baltics. You have this kind of 2000 interventions where they add, I don't know where from, these kind of doors, and they don't care about the step or the space to enter the house, and they don't have a roof. So we added all these kind of elements, of course, in our own language. And this project, what is so nice about it is that it was an industrial building, but we had the task to transform it into housing. And for me, the brewery was always easy, because to transform an industrial building into some kind of a commercial public function is kind of an easy job. I mean, but in housing, that's something else, because housing has completely different parameters. One thing we said, like, okay, the courtyard is a really nice area, so let's make a kind of commune area from it. And then the other thing is, of course, to kind of reuse as much as possible the elements. And so the thing of adding and cutting is the thing we did in this project. So these are the materials that you can find on the spot. And this is kind of a result, what you can do with it. There's nothing new in this one. People are always asking, like, what did you, it's nothing new. It's in fact just cleaned. We, of course, added somewhere on top, we added there something. There's so many things added, but, and that's the way how I was working in the office. So there are some kind of principles. So we check the facade, we check the quality of the facade, we check where we have to make bigger openings. And an important thing, because it was housing, was this kind of inside-outside relationship. So for me, at the threshold, so the space where you have like this kind of cut inside-outside is the space where you have all the discussions. So this kind of a sketch on the side is the element that we introduced. So we found a space like this, but I asked them to cut it in such a way that we created this kind of windowsill. So the sill is an important element, like a place where you, everyone says like in the Netherlands, the houses are like open, but also the people in the Baltic would like to communicate with the people outside, especially because in projects like this, clients are asking for very small apartments. So the apartments, the difference is between 30 square meters, like one-room apartments, up to 80. But there are a lot of small apartments. But if you go there, you will not see this kind of very small apartments, since we did this. And for me, this kind of making cuttings is something that is an ongoing project. That's why I have always a lot of problems with the building authorities, because every time I'm coming to the site, I make some new cuts, and that's not a lot. But nevertheless, I have a good relationship with, since 2-3 students of mine are working in the building authority at the moment, so I can do a phone call and then they are really open. But what helped a lot is that the client was not convinced that the openings would help, but once the openings are there, the light is like penetrating in the space, and it immediately transforms the space, and the client is so happy, oh, there's light, and then he was like forgetting, like, okay, my facade, my little facade, maybe I have to do something with that, because he always invites friends, and they go there and they look at the space, and I was like, maybe I have to plaster it, because the neighbor plastered the facade. So I had a lot of stressful moments. And one thing we did as well, and that was like the discussion in the beginning about the facade, so why I said like the facade is not the only element, is we made a cut in the building. So we never showed that to the building authorities again, but we took out the roof, a hole in the roof, and we cut out here something, and we said like, yeah, this is a non-usable space, yeah, so we don't calculate it anymore. But it's really important because it suddenly also opened the corner. There's light inside, and this kind of thing became unique. So unique that 4 months before the exploitation of the building, the apartment was already sold and somebody was already living there. Before the exploitation of the building, all the apartments were sold. So somebody was really happy. And that also kind of encouraged us to make it more colorful, to be more brave in the whole design process. And still nowadays we are adding things, so it's already, let's say, people are living there, we are still adding elements. So of course then, as you can see, the windows are just placed like, or in the flush with the facade or deeper with the facade, and that's why it gets this kind of entity. But in fact, the building is a kind of a thing that was there already in the beginning. These kind of openings were there. This kind of character was there already from the early stage. And then you start to play with mirrors, and you start to play with other kind of elements. And when people are entering the space, they're always like asking, like they saw this kind of interior, this on the left side. Wow, yeah, you got this kind of big wooden beams and steel beams, and where is it coming from? Well, this was the beams and the steel that we found, and nothing changed. I mean, it's exactly the same position. We just cleaned them, made them white, colored them. Maybe we added here and there some extra structures, but with the same kind of aesthetic, the same kind of things. The only thing we did in this project is like showing where to cut, where to take out, and reuse as much as possible the material that we take out. So that's a kind of an interior that is a result of what is already there. And I'm happy that people like that, so that's the way how we should work, I think, and it's a completely different kind of approach into architecture. Or these kind of spaces, like, was maybe a pity that we couldn't keep all the graffiti inside, but okay, that's not our task, let's say. That was the client that decided to paint them white inside. But the principle, what we did is having this kind of openness, make a connection between inside and outside, between the communal or the common interior space and the outside. And as I was thinking, this Venice is too much. Do I have to show Venice or not? I can show quickly Venice. So Venice is a really nice place. Lots of water, nice people, nice architects. You have to once in a lifetime do this project. And so we did it for already 7 times. So our 5 times being second, we got finally the first prize. So this was a team, some kind of depressive architects, and then a creator and a happy minister. What is the Venice Biennale? Do as much as possible. So what we did is we foreign architects. This is Theodoitin, an important architect who wrote the beautiful book, Handbook of Tyranny. A guy from the Citrus Solutions, the company who is building the fence in Latvia. So they explained all their kind of brilliant ideas and what they were doing. Latvian architects suddenly were interested. They filled the room. Everyone was happy, but those people were not happy. Those are the ones living along the border. So we went there. This is like two young girls living in a house at the fence, so suddenly we get this kind of fix. And this is how everyone knows how our border looks like. So together with an anthropologist who went there, went to these kind of houses, spoke with the people, invited another photographer, also a Latvian one. He was making these kind of really nice pictures about welcome to Europe, and you're living in the Baltic states, so you have to take care of the money. So we don't have a lot of money. So this is our pavilion. And what is inside the pavilion, I call it the whale. So that's the structure of the pavilion. And we like to work with the fluo yellow. So this is how the pavilion in the end looked like. Some playful elements, some references to the border, a camera, a map, these kind of things. This was a really important thing. This element was moving. So if you're on the border, then it's full of cameras, so you're not aware of it. And it's really strange. This is something you expect in a city, like that you're seeing, but not in the pine forest. So this is what we try to do. So in the central element was a camera, so you enter the camera and people are like, oh, am I filmed or not? Because besides that, there were 6 television screens, like in a computer room. And all on the screens we had interviews with people that talked about the area. Another thing we did is we made a small booklet, still available on the Ruby Press. And it's a kind of a password that you need in order to enter the space. And what is in the booklet is the text. And also lovely postcards of spots. Like this is the biggest white stone in the Baltics, or this church, or the pond, or elements that you can visit, but you need passports, you need a document. We were also so brave to design, together with Laima Jurča, who's a famous fashion designer of Latvia, the dresses. So the students that are currently walking in our pavilion have this kind of oversized guard, because this is like a typical Latvian border guard dress, a bit bigger than normal. And then of course what is really nice is like, oh, you have all these kind of IDs, and then there's coming an Estonian photographer, Josef Kiermai, taking pictures, and that people start to look at it, touch it. So this was like something that happened all the time. So the pavilion was working. You can see in the mirror how many people were at the opening. And just to make it around, sorry, this is the website, it's still online. Those are the information. So if you go to Venice, try to click on Instagram and all these kind of things. But what I want to say is that this is just some kind of an idea that you propose in an international audience, but you get so many reactions on it, and it's completely different because our intention was, of course, one to, let's say, that architects should be aware of it, and that architects should help to design also the border in the Baltics. But on the other hand, once you're in Milan, nobody's taking, they don't give about the Baltics. So they talk about a completely different way about this, and this kind of international communication was for us really inspiring. Thanks.
Thank you for the presentation. That was the last presentation, and we are a tiny bit late, but let's have up to half an hour, I would suggest, of follow-up. So I would like to invite you to take the chair and move maybe here because it's a shadowy place and it makes more sense. Ah, okay. Okay, so we can see there. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, let's maybe just move here. I think it's gonna be simpler. Grab some more. Great. So I mean, I kind of don't have a question, but I want to maybe reflect a little bit, and maybe you'll join in, which into something that I see at stake, and also in relation to the workshops. But then let's open maybe afterwards for questions if anyone wants to ask for what was presented, what was discussed, or maybe something in relation to the workshops that most of you here I think are part of. So yeah, thanks a lot for all the presentations. I mean, they're very different, but extremely inspiring. You know, have like very different approaches and deals with different things in my mind. But I kind of I was asked. This is not the first time I'm doing this. I was asked by Laura to kind of be here tonight and have a little chat with you. And I, you know, in the sort of, I brought here a certain thinking about in relation to, there's a very loose relationship to, as Laura mentioned, that there's going to be some presentation of workshops in Biennale in Pavilion, which kind of deals with architecture and tree, and this is something that I worked a lot, quite a lot as a landscape architect, and there was something that I was kind of thinking about coming through my summer readings of two kind of things about gardens and about landscape. One of them was the book that came out earlier this year by Olivia Lamb, it's called Garden Outside of Time, where she kind of, she's telling a story, she starts telling the story of her during the pandemic, buying a house and starting a garden, going deeper in different kinds of stories about, unpacking generally the idea of gardening from kind of actual day-to-day kind of things that happening in her particular plot that she was buying, and kind of tracing the history of that plot, and seeing how this relates to different kind of histories that, with garden design, and to slavery, to this money that came out of like a sugar trade and so on, and then going to something much more creative, as a kind of resistance, as a kind of garden that also was kind of fought of the revolution and so on and so forth. But it kind of involves in this super complex story about this thing that you kind of take for granted that we know what it is, in a sense. And on the other hand, I also dedicated some time to like really very technical reading of, like, for example, Michael Riesel, Worlds. It's basically how what maybe Indrė was talking about, biochar and so on, these other things. So how, for example, trees, grow their roots and what kind of different elements are there to kind of make them, as biochar, for example, one of the things which really kind of increases the area of root, like by a couple of thousand tons and so on. So kind of dealing with this almost kind of scientific and factual element. But then then there's this tension for me between this kind of a matter of fact and a matter of concern. A matter of fact of, say, clay being, below the surface of Tallinn, and then also all these stories that you tell about, like this kind of relationship to the culture that was so interesting. Or Manten, in your case, this is kind of reuse of something that that is, on the one hand, from our today's point of view, it's basically like an abandoned building which should be torn down. I mean, it's a kind of usual practice of in architecture and construction, that's basically seen as a rubbish, you know, and then you're kind of going there and actually saying, well, but actually, you know, it's kind of full of possibilities and so on. And I think very similarly in New York, kind of look at the landscape, you know, in the sense. So I think there's this, you know, there's this tension for me, and I'm kind of thinking about these ideas of ecology, you know, like maybe from, I don't know, which kind of now has history of itself, like, you know, that it's also as much as kind of technical questions on how we deal with it, like, for example, with like, you know, global warming, as much as with like kind of new modes of storytelling. And not only storytelling, but you know, making, I don't want to go like into this very complex maybe thing, but making it as a part of our everyday life, the stories that actually we live. And somehow it's really funny that we can't use the clay, you know, it's going to the rubbish, in the sense that we have so many, you know, like even the story of getting clay to the workshop area was, you know, like the easiest way was actually to go to Seluka, right, and buy one that, you know, rather than get the one which is kind of coming from somewhere next door. So we somehow are almost alienated from these very, you know, things that are at hand. And we are, you know, kind of alienated in a sense for kind of this industrial standards and institutional habits, you know, you say, or, you know, they have to restore the truth of history by rebuilding the window, right? So that's each of the kind of, you know, heritage specialists would say, you know. It doesn't have to do anything with history, by the way. It's just a kind of habit. You know, it's just what they say. And somehow to live it is, you know, more complicated than actually to live with that. So I think there's, and I think in kind of thinking about landscaping, about materials, you know, I kind of find this really at tension. You know, how do you deal with things at hand, simple things, you know, in relation to this, let's say, things as they are established. You know, as I know, Indrė, you mentioned in your presentation, in your written presentation of your lecture, that, you know, there's certain things have been fixed by this kind of modernity, you know, like that we are actually, you know, behaving accordingly. You know, if we need some house, coming in an industrial building and these kind of things. And I also kind of see this relationship also to what's happening in this very process of, you know, this workshop. You know, where actually, you know, on the one hand, this is a very good example of how you guys work, and, you know, and it's actually a practice, actually doing something with materials at hand, with materials that are there. But at the same time, in relation to what, you know, we do as architects, as interior designers, as landscape architects, it's a very rare opportunity to actually go there and build. And it's, you know, and almost there is no kind of, let's say, legitimacy in that, in the sense that, you know, like, oh, it can't be that. You actually produce drawings and specifications, and, you know, you calculate quantities and you hand over. And then, you know, and then maybe they hire you to come and look at things, or maybe they call you and say it's something a bit different. So, I mean, that's the usual thing that we kind of used to. So, and I see this kind of, this, I don't know, like this word regulation is very like left wing here, but it's somehow this kind of, you know, that we're somehow estranged from what we have at hand, and it's really hard to deal, which I really enjoy looking at your work and seeing how you deal with that, you know, how you, in a very different ways. But it's a kind of storytelling, not necessarily as being a storytelling, you know, Hannes, like you did such a good, you know, such a, like, I don't know, like very, what's the word, it's not like, it's kind of a cheerful relationship. It's like this very beautiful and poetic kind of, you know, almost like so far from, you know, like red houses, you know, from the lips from Alba Singer, right, in relation to this kind of movement of eyes and so on. So all these kind of things. But then in the end, actually, they give they bring so much force in it for the imagination that, you know, actually dropping into this like zone of like scientific facts, you know, which kind of, you know, tell you what to do but not necessarily work. So I talked a lot in a very abstract way here, but I think, yeah, I don't know, I really enjoyed your talks in this sense, and maybe this is something, I don't really have a question here with this, but maybe that's an observation, and that's what I kind of, let's say, see the task for myself all the time, how you deal with these like areas that are outside of, you know, the standards and outside of the institutional habits that control us as specialists. And also I think there's something with academia as well, so we have more freedom to do things here rather than in the field. So yeah, I'm gonna maybe stop here. I don't know if you have any like thoughts on that. So please.
One thing I want to add was I think really important is that, okay, I showed some practical things and also doing quite a lot of research, and in that sense we did the research about agroecological urbanism, which is very related to what Indrė was presenting, a Horizon project for more than 3 years with different universities, and I think that's the thing that always has tackled me as an architect, so not to be so fixed in the practical, but as you said, like, yeah, maybe we are more free in the academic world. I don't believe that. I mean, it's just a fault of the architects that we are not free enough, because you see lots of, Hannes is also a practitioner in a way, and everyone is laughing with the way how he is approaching the materiality, but he did it. I mean, and that's like why we appreciate the way how they work with materials. And it's not that Hannes only wants to work probably with Resonant Earth, although he's like almost the Resonant Earth king of the Baltics. Yeah? But I mean, that's exactly what you want to be free. And if you're well, of course, with one leg in the academic, one leg in the other one, it's maybe easier. It's like a normal thing. But I think in all the projects that good architects are doing, they're trying to, always like being on both sides, so trying to be critical. And that's what I also told to the students, if you're not critical, I mean, we had a wonderful talk with EMTA about the Eindhoven Design Academy, that, I mean, they are open, and the people that are coming out of this institute, they are different, and it's thanks to this kind of, and probably the tutors, and some kind of a mental shift that not everyone has.
Just short, because it's very interesting, Manten, you know, like almost like inversion, and it shows, you know, practical or like application on build. But it's also because I haven't been doing it for the 5 last years, to be honest, and it's very conscious in my case, because I think I mainly came from learning to and the thing is, like, I realized and working that if we keep on working and practicing in this manner of like standardized, you know, putting ourselves in this kind of standard idea of like practice, we will run out of jobs very quickly. Because the world, the planet is going somewhere, you know, and the practice of architecture, urban planning, design sphere is not yet so fast to catch up. And it's not fast because it is intersected, in my opinion, always with economy and politics. You know, it's very hard to actually execute something profoundly, you know, good in this was displayed very well today. So the thing is that education and these formats, you know, that they can be experimental, they can be nominal in the courses, they also prepare people to reinvent the profession itself. So it's really like critical thinking, you know, to find your spheres of activity and to find the forms how you practice. And the topic of form of practice came all the time today. It's really about thinking how do we practice, and whatever the practice is, if it's writing, speaking, you know, creating synergies, doing you know, big research projects or renovation. It doesn't matter. It's really about like finding new forms how to practice. And if you put a lot to think about history, and I like to think about theory, because if we put these things in a time dimension and in a kind of a planetary boundary, our architectural practice that we know now, the 20th century, is like very, very small. People have been building, and Manten will show these beautiful vernacular structures today. People have been building for thousands and thousands of years, and there is so much intelligence. And if you look with the invitation, you know, this workshop, to look also to the natural environment, how the intelligence is circulating, you know, between in natural realm. There is so much intelligence there, and somehow in the last 50 to 100 years, we sort of tend to delete all that, you know, and like put it in like a very compressed idea of a very narrow idea of a profession. So this is, I think, very rewarding, you know, to see also these different takes on the practice.
So if I somehow try to reflect my presentation, as much as I understand, it is kind of like educational event in here is going on, and there is a responsibility to teach somebody something. And what I try to do, very abstract way, I try to teach how to create narrative. It was pretty abstract, pretty dadaistic in a way, surrealistic as well. But I think it's a skill of creating narrative extremely important. And somehow I would have to say that I learned a lot from my kids' piano studies in recent years. That's why I also know Tiit so well. And recently I was in one piano class, and I asked from the teacher, okay, what are we going to do today, or what you're planning to do today? Do you plan to take off for mistakes? Also, when you're starting a new piece, there are lots of mistakes always. Is it like a main task? And she said that if you don't have any other idea, then you start to clean mistakes, which was extremely interesting, extremely inspiring thought for me, meaning that there is something else, not only to design perfect way, perfect solutions, perfect spaces, perfect architecture. If you don't have any ideas, then you can do like this, yes, like the right materials, right proportions, etc. But looks like also the music's a narrative. It's also kind of like abstract for me. Same way it's abstract. What is a color in music? When you play the music, what is actually color, and what is a narrative as well? And when I'm going to the concert, I always try to understand the narrative, but I always feel that I don't understand. But there are something definitely. There are some musicians are better than others. Everybody understands it. So I think, and also in architecture, there are some architects who are able to create a narrative, and it really works. But in my field, I worked several years in the field of sustainable material. I tried to promote sustainable building materials, etc. And I found there are lots of barriers. And the main barrier of you asked why not everybody is building London way is cultural barrier. And I think that you can go through the cultural barriers through the narratives. I had a big fight with a Minister of Culture of Estonia in my last position. And we also started to promote and look at what's the people in Europe, what's the people in Belgium, in France, and everywhere are doing, and try to somehow educate the Estonian architects in the same field that we talk about circular materiality, about hemp, bio-based stuff like earth and things like this. And Minister of Culture, who was a main funder of us, went very kind of like nervous. They said, yes, this is a very interesting topic what you are dealing with, but we don't have money for that. So, and okay, I understand. Those years also we had the task to take Estonian architecture and take it to the Venice, and I was a trickster. I had started to ask the trickster like a question from them, but why were you going to Venice? Well, what is the reason to go to Venice? And I didn't get actually very good feedback. They were really shocked about such kind of like questions. But what I started to think on those years is that actually all this circularity, all this kind of environmental architecture is a question of culture. It's pretty much connected with the culture issue. And exactly if we as a state or as a country want to go kind of like a brighter, greener future, it is exactly the topic of the Minister of Culture. So they started to tell us that it is a topic of Minister of Environment. They have to fund it, not us. But yes, in certain cases, and maybe in the second phase, but I think in the first phase, it is topic of culture. So maybe one more example. When we made this unburned bricks to one exhibition, and I met, let's say, a worker or a constructor who took it from this machine, this compressed earth block, and somehow touched it, and as you know, it is a weak material. Corners right away start to go away. And he says that it's not concrete. So it was a very interesting comment, and he kind of like says that it's not a concrete, and I don't trust this material. I don't use it, but I don't see any reason to use it. And but we know that's why that is weak. It's a quality, it's circularity. So it's much easier to push it to kind of like a circle around, and same time I had again kind of example in Japan came to my mind. It's a separation of boards from the rice paper. Of course, when you throw in water, and if you're trying to put some they're doing and say avoid apart, but there are actually centuries lived with such kind of like material, and it means that if we are developing new materials and new aesthetics as well, we need a new culture, developed culture who can live with such kind of like proposals.
Thank you. I mean, I think that for me, this question, I maybe just will leave it open, and maybe we can ask if anyone else has questions. But my observation, or hearing you free talk, is seeing that it's a very good example of like this kind of different storytelling in a sense, which kind of challenges challenges our perceptions of how things are done. These examples are really great in a sense. And maybe this question which is always the trick is the question of the scale and the scope, and also so how if this is to revolutionize something in a sense of what we are kind of not critiquing, but let's say try to challenge, is a question what is the impact in a sense of but I've really enjoyed seeing all of your presentations in a sense, presenting very, very different ways of dealing with kind of storytelling from very different narratives in a sense, but really kind of challenging and having a lot of impact. But maybe let's ask if there are any questions, not necessarily related to what we just talked now, and have some. Yeah.
I would like to break the ice. Thank you very much. Honestly, I'm jealous to our students that we didn't have any close to that what we have here when we were studying, but probably we had enough things. I will try not to be like Povilas, who can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk on top. I will read the question. The question will be for all of you. Of course, I would expect separate answers. So, I've already said about the excellent presentations, and also they had, to me, they had a clear message. Maybe some of the topics are more sophisticated, less sophisticated, or we can use other words, but they have messages, very clear messages. And today's audience here consists mostly or totally of spatial design specialists. So, kind of task, but also a question. Could you choose another specialization or group of people to whom you would like to present these presentations, and the audience you would like them to hear these messages? Who are they? Just shortly name and shortly explain why. Thank you.
I think it's a very easy question, especially in the field of the gardening. We've done it a lot to people who are taking care of gardens, allotments. And for instance, the housing project that I showed in the garden, you have, I asked the landscape designer to only add eatable plants. And that is thanks to the fact that we did the research, so we know a lot about, let's say, the importance of agricultural gardens. It means like that there's also a social aspect to food provision, so that in order to make a garden common, you have to add things that are also common for people. They have to take care of it. So in that sense, when we do these kind of discussions, we always say that, yeah, it's very important to do it like this, and it's a narrative that you build up, yeah, of course, because the landscape designer came with nice, beautiful plants, and we said that they have to be beautiful. So I don't care. I mean, just that there's some kind of that is an area that you have to take care of, and then always reflect into the communal garden. Of course, communal gardens they have kind of bad sense in the Baltics because they are related to the communistic period. But nevertheless, they have a sense of communal thing. In that sense, so I'm always happy to give lectures to gardeners and say old ladies and all people that are taking care of gardens. That is more than that. But it's very popular.
But it's a bit different approach than the approach to the architecture.
Yeah, but that's the same. They're the same like the client. The client is also somebody who doesn't care about art. And it was the client in this case that was looking for edible plants. You know why? Because it's cheap. You can find these kind of plants.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I mean, and this kind of narrative worked, and then you get some kind of story, and somebody is happy, and they. So I mean, yeah, it doesn't have to be to architects or to spatial designers. I think that's the most important thing of design, that you try to listen and to do research.
My presentation was designed for a spatial design department. No, I mentioned the Minister of Culture. Of course, this can be one target audience, the Minister of Climate as well. But currently, actually, we are developing one study program for local authorities, and which starts in this autumn. And somehow, also in the context of promoting circular materials, I found that architects are totally okay with this. They are really extremely interested about it. But private developers, at least in Estonia, in a tiny country, they can't allow it. It's different in Brussels, different in Belgium. But in Estonia, I mean that budgets are relatively limited. It's maybe it's a question of culture as well. It's always very important of culture. And somehow we reached to the understanding that the innovation have to come from the state. So we have to promote those ideas, those kind of values among local authorities in the state, and that's the thing what we're doing at the moment. Let's see how far we want to reach with this. And if the state builds the first, let's say, examples, then maybe it reaches to the private developments as well. Because I speak quite many with some big real estate developers, and they say that we are not taking the risk of this kind of unbaked brick. So somebody else has to take it. But I think that Estonia is quite okay, quite cool. At the moment, huge wooden building is built in the center of Tallinn, designed by Kava architects. And I really like the concept, how they explain this project, that there are many also kind of like, let's say, historical methodology will be certified. And it has it is important value. Luckily, we have also some clay walls in this building.
No, that's also easy and it's difficult. So if it's coming to very close professional community, actually, I think I like really have a DNA of like interior design, because my first audience where I want to always like negotiate with and challenge is the urbanists. I think they lost the ability to think the space and like think in like large figures, and that comes with the history of organizing. But I'm thinking about the projects and investigations now, besides the local communities. Actually, I found with the last investigation with the winter now, very interesting conversations and difficult ones, so that's why they interested the audience of the park and conservationists of the nature. So park management and politics of like sort of the tensions of what we assume to be nature for nature and nature for human activities. And what is very interesting, what I learned now in the context of Lithuania, but also a little bit of France and Provence, is that the human activities, you know, and the economies are not part of that interest. And somehow there is a regulation and traditional lifestyles that kind of are permitted to live with that landscape and with that nature. But this is exactly the core of my critique. You know, we live off nature. We are part of nature. We are like you know, somehow nearby the park territory, and these territories are important, of course. We need to share living space. We need to somehow negotiate that between all life forms. But so this is the discussion I find very constructive at the time, to talk to people who are responsible to preserve and somehow also make sure that there are some resources that are not extracted, right? But there is a kind of also very authoritarian idea about it. So this is the conversation I like.
Very architectural.
Yeah, very architectural. And also the building codes of the park territories. I love this.
In that sense, I agree with Hannes. One of the reasons why we went back to Belgium is because there is a program from the state. So we are now doing 10 high-rise buildings with ecological materials. And it's simply because they forced everyone to live in 2030 in this kind of buildings. And so it has to be circular. It's like it's not coming from us. It's coming from somebody from Brussels saying like, hey, but I want to have my housing in a circular. Like, oh, interesting. And then you show all kind of examples. Oh yeah, this is also like this ramp also interesting. So the mentality changed, and I think that's, although here you have all the materials, it's still a shift that has to happen, probably on a level of the authorities of the ministry.
Thank you. Any further questions from the audience?
Least one student.
Who is the brightest?
I choose one.
Maybe not a question, but I can talk very loud.
For the live stream, you need
Cool. So I just wanted to thank the interior design department, Laura, and everyone involved, so that they brought you such incredibly inspiring and cool people to us. So it's delightful to be in your presence and to hear your stories and see your projects.
Are you hiring?
I hope it will be as cool as that.
Well, it's, I think I said it like yesterday or a few days ago. That's with a project that we're doing. Let's shoot for the stars and see where we land. So yeah, maybe let's shoot, to be more or be better or cooler. But let's see where we land. It's gonna be good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, I remember one thing. Reflecting on the narrative. Reflecting on the narrative. I just like a year ago probably understood one thing, and it changed a lot in how I do creative things. Because in an environment when you're somewhat creative or have to create something, this can maybe more from the music side than design or something else. We always have this discussion with the band that what's the difference in waiting for inspiration, or maybe creating from inspiration and having to create from a story maybe that you develop, and then create music that tells the story, and then just creating from work. Just sit and start working, and then the work starts doing something, and it's something, but it's not good, and we do it since it's good enough, let's say. And I think narrative is their best version of doing something creative, but doing something from doing something. Like you just sit down, write what you want to do, and then project that narrative into creativity. So it's like a threshold, which is like very nice metaphor in our situation. Yeah, so it's a very nice threshold into being creative from doing something, not waiting till you will be inspired to do something creative, because you have to do something creative. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because what I really appreciate about music is that you have fixed notes. But Hannes, we had some discussion with Hannes of this space and music of his colors. At least I understand it as colors. Every player is like giving his own, it's not an interpretation, but his own space. That's also a way you have to prepare yourself before playing the piano. And what for me is, as an architect at least, I mean, I went to the architect building. I also was lucky to meet the architect behind that. But this kind of the impact of space and the thing that you can do as a musician is like incredibly unlikely. The last song you played was like for me already. It kills myself because I was doing exactly the same thing in the space. And for me, for instance, the space you were playing was not good enough for the song. So there was no relation in nature for that. I'm always I'm always connecting Baltic music with nature, with certain positions in the forest, views in the forest. So I'm wondering if you're playing the piano, you probably also have some kind of a spatial idea of where you would want to play it, how would you play it, and so on. So what is like space for you?
I think it's very much individual, because very often in those pieces there's nothing told you except for the notes, so it's very much up to interpretation for everybody. Me as the pianist and the performer can have something in my mind, and no one else would have the same thing in their mind. About the space, I think I'm going to be so and so about where I'm from, because in a way, the space is in the music. I created kind of a space with music, and momentarily trying to include everybody in that space.
Yeah, that's in way how because there's also a Hungarian composer working with colors. Does that mean if you would have a composition of colors, let's say, instead of the notes, that they would play differently? I mean, could you play with colors? Let's say if you could use the color code, let's say, make more music with, not that the red is dull, but the red is, I don't know, your.
That's also very much up for discussion. There is very many composers with synesthesia, and everybody has different meaning. Everybody has different connections, and I imagine it's like unfathomable how can someone see themselves as this kind of color. Many of them have work breaking down what color is, what note, and also emotion scattering. For example, also broke down which emotions and what comes with some certain keys and colors. One thing about scattering and colors as well, almost all of his music is inspired by his synesthesia, but there's one piece where he actually tried to include the colors visually. There's a piece written for piano, orchestra, and choir, and something called the light organ. It's essentially an instrument that has a separate line written in the score, but it shouldn't produce sound. All the notes there are supposed to project the color into the hall. Unfortunately, Scrapping died a few years before the match actually realized thing. But I believe that most of those performances are with that instrument, like those colors.
I suggest we conclude here. Thank you a lot for presentations and for the discussion. Thank you for attending. There's still 2 days to go. Yeah?
48
so
hours, we
48
count like
hours,
that.
48 hours. So I'm very curious to see the end results. I haven't had the pleasure today to pop in and see things a little bit. But thanks a lot for everybody, and good luck with finalizing. And maybe just to say, the finish line is when? There's going to be some event there, right? So maybe Friday at 5. So I'll see you Friday at 5. And yeah, thank you.